Hey everyone, welcome to DEI After 5. Okay, so we're just kind of getting back into the swing of things. And as I was thinking about, okay, what do I want to talk about in this episode of the show? I immediately thought of my colleague and friend, Andrea Tatum, because right now I'm getting so many conversations or having people call me that's asking, what do I do? I just got a master's degree in this type of work. And now the industry is shifting. Organizations are stepping back from their DEI efforts. What do we do? And so I knew that Andrea was going to be the number one person for me to talk to about this. So, Andrea, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So, for those that may not know who you are, tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do, and then we're just going to dive right in.
Awesome. My name is Andrea G. Tatum. I am the DEI career coach. I am also the founder and of the DEI Career Center, where I really have been working with individuals to help them with clarity, with confidence, and overall alignment in figuring out what's next, which is kind of a constant question that folks have, whether they're pivoting in or out of a career, they're realizing they just want change. So, really, my job as a coach is to support people going through career transitions. And I'm also a full time consultant working with HR professionals and leaders to really help them align their organizational culture, their strategies around creating workplaces where people want to stay and where everybody is there to help the organization meet their mission, but doing it through a lens of equity and inclusion in order to drive more diversity within their organizations as well.
So, I'm so glad that you added in the consulting piece of your work because organizations are still looking for DEI consultants, looking for DEI professionals in their organizations. But as we know, and we you and I have talked about it, things are shifting, right? January 2025, the EOs came out, this quote unquote anti DEI legislation. All the foolishness is the word that I'm going to use.
There we go. Yep.
It's the word that I'm going to use today. But all of this around this illegal DEI. And we both know there are aspects of DEI that can be illegal, right?
Mhm.
But a majority of the work that's been done over the past at least 5 years have fallen into understanding what it means to be more equitable in the workplace and creating opportunities. And a lot of the roles were to support that. So, talk to me a bit about what you're seeing kind of on the job front, because that is the one area that folks are nervous
Yeah.
about, especially with these jobs rolling back, these big companies saying they're getting rid of their DEI. What are you seeing?
Yeah. Well, let's kind of take a step back even prior to January,
Mm,
and what was happening. And the reality is we're in a tough economy, and we've been in a little bit of a tough economy for organizations for a minute. And a lot of companies right now are really reassessing their bottom line. Even before January, we were seeing a significant number of layoffs in different departments and areas of companies, and what that signals to me is that people were really just trying to figure out, like, how do we stay afloat, right? Like, if you
yeah.
don't have a company, you don't have jobs. So that's where I start the conversation, is in the reality that uh some of this is coming from a place of how do we just keep our organization alive, especially when you start to think about smaller companies, startups in that space. They've been doing, reductions in force for a little bit of time now. Then kind of fast forward and let's layer on what's going on around kind of the attacks around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so what I'm really seeing is there's some companies who they're like, hallelujah, thank you. We're just done with DEI because they were doing performative work to start with.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. They were just looking for an excuse to say,
Yeah.
"Oh, no, we can't do this anymore because there was this executive order," which in reality, some of those orders and some of those things, like, I would say this even goes back as far as to when we first started seeing the work being done to dismantle affirmative action within higher
Mhm.
education. Companies said, "Oh, well, then we can't do it because," and I'm like, What's happening in the higher education sector is not apples to apples what's happening for your organization." So again,
Yeah.
what you start to see is fear. And unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of organizations coming from a place of fear and just generally don't understand because things are moving so rapidly, and we're having to try to unpack, who does this affect? What does this actually mean? Language is vague in many
Yeah.
executive orders, but unfortunately, what that means is the companies who are already ready to kind of let it go, they're going to do that.
Yeah.
The companies who said, we really want to figure this out and that we understand that DEI isn't just programmatic, but that DEI is really how we do the work, or at least that's where we want to be. Those are the companies that I'm still seeing say either we want to hire um, individuals to do DEI to come into the company, or they're still hiring consultants to do the work because even more so now they're going, we just need help figuring out what we can and can't do.
Right. It's interesting because I am seeing very similar things where a lot of my clients last year were in that pause and we're just trying to see what's going on. Many I actually had conversations with that said, we're going to move forward. We just need to figure out how best to move forward in
Yep.
a way that we're not going to be targeted. Like we're
Yes.
still moving in the same direction, but we may tweak some verbiage here, or we may change a couple of titles there, or shift some departments. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. I saw
Yep.
an article this morning where there are a number of organizations that said we're doing away with their DEI that are now slowly bringing it back. And just
Yeah.
like, there's no fanfare, right? So there was fanfare about it going away, but then they're like, guess what? It's coming back because we see, and I hate the business case, but the business case for doing this type of work. And it's not just about hiring, it's who our customers and clients are as well too, because it's not homogenous. None of this is homogenous. And so you have to be able to have the skills to be able to operate in these spaces. So I wanted to touch on that a little. In You and I've had conversations. I was on your podcast talking about how um, there's so many people that say, "Oh, I want a DEI job,"
Yeah.
because you know where I'm going with this,
Yes,
right?
I do.
I
Let's
want
do
a
it.
DEI job, but the question that we always ask is like, okay, but what do you do? Like, what do you do?
Ah.
What are the other skills that you bring to the table? And so, talk to me a little bit about getting out of this mindset of I want to do DEI work and the skills and competencies, because I think people feel it's the programmatic piece, right? They see the programmatic piece, but not understanding the breadth and depth of what these roles actually entail or could entail.
And I mean, you hit it just spot on. And I know what say it's an issue both from the corporate side and the individual side.
Hmm.
Because from the corporate side, to our point, like, yay, we still want to do DEI, but we don't fundamentally know what that really means or looks like for us and our organization. But they put together a job description. They kind of, and it doesn't necessarily make sense. It tends to
Yeah.
be very initiative driven. It tends to be very programmatic, focusing on employee resource groups and culture, things like that. And so here's the thing. Here's what I do. So at the DEI Career Center, part of the course that I teach is about kind of understanding what I call the ecosystem of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a singular job within an organization. There's many different pieces of the puzzle. And when DEI work is done really, really, really well, it's actually embedded throughout lots of areas. So, for example, I have some people who they've come to love the part of DEI that's doing training. They like the
Right.
facilitation. They want to do presentations. And I wish that DEI was simply standing up and doing presentations and telling people about it. But here's what happens. So, like, let's say that there's that part of the puzzle. We've informed you, we've given you some history and some information. Most people walk out of that kind of training and they go, well, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yep.
Right? We want to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I actually like to really think about it as focusing on equity and inclusion as verbs. Those are things that we are going to do. We're going to make our company more equitable. We're going to make our company more inclusive. And therefore, part of doing that should help us to drive more diversity if we are being intentional with our actions that do that. So then you have the person in the ecosystem whose job is to inform, to educate. And that might fall under a department like learning and development, actually.
Yep. Yep.
And so, if you are the person who your job is to understand theories around adult learning, it might be more on the design side of the learning and development, or even if you kind of fall under the HR side where you're doing presentations to hiring managers, right? Like you like that part where you're doing the presenting piece, but that's not it. So it's like if I'm going to now think about where DEI can exist from maybe an HR side of the thing of the world, an HR business partner, for example. I think
Mhm.
about that work as the person who is in a consultative and coaching role, who has the ability to truly make an impact on how the work of a specific department, say engineering, R&D, marketing, whatever that line of business is, to make sure that the work of the talent management, professional development, that
Mhm.
entire employee life cycle from hiring to, offboarding someone is done in a way that is equitable, that's done in a way that's inclusive, all of those kinds of things. So again, it's about how do you embed it into the job. And so there's so many different pieces of the puzzle when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It might be in the talent acquisition side. If your job is recruiting and talent acquisition, then guess what? You have a DEI job.
Yeah. To that point, right? Your title may not say DEI, but as you and I've talked about a million times, right? It's how are you approaching this job with the lens of inclusion, right? How are you approaching this job with the lens of equity? And you do not have a form, you don't need to have a formal title in order to do that. And so I think so many people feel like, oh, well, I'm not in a DEI role, so there's nothing that I can do. No, you absolutely are empowered to be more inclusive and be more equitable from where you sit. And it's fascinating because as I've done this show now, we're in season 10. A majority of the folks that have gone into consulting in this work come from marketing, come from communications, come from other parts of the business, right? Many of them don't come from HR. They come from these other areas and these other disciplines. And it just speaks to how important it is to have that holistic view of DEI beyond just the employees. Are you,
Absolutely.
as you were saying, like a product manager, right? Are you on a product team? How are you looking at what you are doing from a lens of equity and inclusion?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's getting out of this mindset that I have to have a DEI job in order to do this work.
Yeah. It's actually, I think about it in the fact that like you should just assume whatever your job title is, that your job is DEI, and that also you actually can influence from whatever position you are in.
Absolutely.
I encourage people to remember that you have a voice and that if you are in an organization that has a level of psychological safety where you can kind of go, hey, hey, don't forget to have those moments because it's very easy. We all do it, right?
Mhm.
Hey, here's the thing. We need to launch this product. We need to get this off of the ground. We need to do this thing. And you're very focused on like execution from A to
The
Z,
thing. Yeah.
the thing. But what I really, really encourage people who say, I'm passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that may not be my title, is start there. Start with what your passion around diversity, equity, and inclusion is, and start with whatever
Mhm.
job you're in. And you should be able to define in whatever role you're in how you have actually contributed to making your organization more diverse, more equitable, more inclusive, or whatever that thing is, because you're going to have a hard time, even if you're the person who says, oh, I want to transition into it. If I ask you, well, what have you done to make your organization more diverse, equitable, inclusive, and you can't answer that question,
Mhm.
it's going to be very hard to make that transition. So the opportunity exists in actually how you do the work and thinking about what you can do to influence, regardless of whatever your title is.
Yeah, how are you showing up? I mean, how are you showing up? And, even if an organization gets rid of their DEI, you can still show up in an inclusive way. You can still show up in an equitable way. You can still create those conversations, right, to challenge and push back. I've shared the story before where I was working on a team and we were creating a website on all of the inclusive efforts that we've done within this company. And I asked the question, well, is the website going to be screen reader accessible?
Mm,
And they looked at me like I was crazy.
mhm.
And I'm like, well, we can't talk about inclusion if you're making it an exclusive product, right? Where people can't even use a screen reader. And so it's those types of conversations where you get people out of this routine of just go, 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 go,
Yep.
and create a pause. Like, who's not going to have access to this, right? Because now you're opening it up to new audiences. And that's not just employees. Again, this is customer focused,
This is customer
right?
focused. Yeah.
And so that's where I think so many organizations or even individuals, as you were saying, can step out of this mindset of, oh, I have to be within DEI. No, it's how you're showing up every single day, and how you do this work. So I want to ask you, um, if there was like one piece of advice that you could give folks who are looking for a job in this economy, in this job market, that want to show up in this DEI space,
Mm.
right? What's that one piece of advice that you would give them?
Mm. I think it goes back to what I was just saying. Like, really have a good grasp on how you have already shown up and be ready to talk about and think about like what it is that you're going to do for the organization. Because
Mhm,
I think it's very easy to come at DEI from a heart place, and that's wonderful. But most CEOs and executives come from a head space. They
mhm,
come from an analytical place. They come from a what can you do for me mindset.
mhm.
So, in thinking about transitions, think a lot about what you have done and how that can help the next company. So, whether you're working on, I kind of call it your career narrative, and that career narrative should be able to show up in everything from your resume to your LinkedIn profile to how you tell your stories in your interviews, that you should be very, very clear on results and
Yeah.
less on the titles. So that way, as you think about the different roles that you might be able to transfer those skills into, think about how the skills apply in a way that's going to benefit the organization, because that is so much of what companies are thinking about at the end of the day is their bottom line, how to be more efficient, how to drive engagement, how to do all of those things. So that's my number one piece of advice is just to be very, very clear on understanding how your skills and experience can impact an organization, and really help them to do whatever that mission or vision or whatever that thing is.
Absolutely. I mean, as you were talking, I'm thinking it's going from that passion to results, right?
Yep.
Like we all can have a whole lot of passion about a whole lot of things. But
Yep.
what are the results? What's the value that you bring to the organization? And
Yeah.
that's going to be dollars and cents. That's numbers. That's
That's
analytics,
nice.
right? Like that's what they're really looking at. And I hate to say it that way, but that's when, especially when we're in a time and a place where the economy is what it is, that bottom line is critical. And so making sure that you do what you do with that passion, but being able to show positive results. And that speaks to why this work is important,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, because
So
I'll just say, like, right,
yep,
so I'll give an example. So let's say that you're doing your resume for the 5,000th time, which is what I hear from a lot of people. They're like, "Andrea, oh my gosh, I keep rewriting my resume. I keep rewriting my resume. I'm not getting any bites. I'm not getting anything." And what I often see in resumes are kind of a checklist of things that you've done. Managed an ERG,
mhm,
led facilitated a course on unconscious bias, did this. But the question I always ask my clients is resulting in what?
what? Yeah, yeah,
What was the outcome? And that doesn't necessarily have to be, such a deep number of, increased the number of this by 45%. If you can have that, that's fabulous.
right.
Fabulous. But sometimes you have to kind of reimagine what impact is. And sometimes it's quantitative. Hey, I actually worked with 8 ERGs across five, different countries. Well, now you're showing me that you have the ability to work across, more of a global
Locally. Yep.
landscape, and that actually has a lot of value. If I don't understand that, if you just told me you worked with 8 ERGs, I want to, or you just work with ERGs. Knowing you work with 8 ERGs tells me you can handle capacity and juggle multiple things at a time. Telling me you work globally tells me you have a different perspective. So when you're thinking about, again, your skills and your experience, make sure you're not just coming at it from a I did it, but I did it and it resulted in what?
Absolutely. Okay, Andrea. So if folks wanted to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Go to DEIcareer.com. You can check out the different services that I offer in terms of coaching. I offer a 6 session package, which really allows me to support people from understanding their values, understanding their skills, and realigning them to possible jobs. So whether you're still wanting to look at DEI jobs, which I'm not saying don't look at DEI jobs, they still exist, they're still there, but they may be, again, under different titles.
Mhm.
And so I really work with people on honing in and understanding their skills and experience and how they could possibly translate. But I also help people identify those areas of, like, what's missing? What skills might I need to level up on? And so it doesn't mean that you work with me and you're gonna have a job tomorrow, but it's about really getting that clarity and understanding where you do fit. And if you're interested in learning more about the consulting work that I do with organizations or leadership coaching, you can also reach out to me at AndreaGTatum.com. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I respond fairly quickly there. So yeah, I'm always looking to build my network and find ways to support people. And the last thing I'll leave people with is also you can go to DEI careerboard.com if you are looking for another place besides LinkedIn to just look for jobs. So I also manage a career board and have for several years, where I really focus on jobs that drive impact within the diversity, equity, and inclusion space.
Wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, my friend. I just thought that
Yes.
this was a great conversation to have as we're bringing back this podcast and people are asking these questions. And so I couldn't think of anybody better to have this conversation with. So thank you.
Always
Thank you.
glad to be in space with you, Sasha.
Wonderful. So, hey, everyone, if you were able to grab a couple of nuggets from this conversation, I hope that you are check out Andrea in the work that she does because it is absolutely amazing. I send people to her all of the time when they're talking about career and really trying to figure out kind of the space and how they can show up. So do that. If you want to learn more about what we're doing here with DEI After 5, you can always find us on Substack, where you can get the full episodes of this and so many more shows. And until next time, have a good one. Take care.